Okay, guys, I want to do a demo for you about grouping and history. And I wanted to show you history. History is really important because it's something we haven't talked about yet. Okay, but the important thing about history is whenever we're working and we're going in and we're taking multiple objects, and I don't know, I tried to mimic this to get it to work, but basically what I did is I took a cube right here, I duplicated the cube, and I did a boolean inside it right here. And so what I didn't do, if you notice, a lot of times it's really easy. The center of the pivot for this cube has gone over here to the far left-hand side. Okay, that's pretty common effect that happens. Okay, so what happens is sometimes we will come over and we'll have multiple items like this, and then we group them. By grouping them, we come down over here, and I just hit Control G, which are the hotkeys. But if you look under Edit here, you're going to find the keys down here for Group and Ungroup. So I label them pretty easy, Control U and Control G. Okay. The reason why we need to do this and talk about this is as you guys finish a model, you want to be able to group things in parts and pieces. So that way when you look at it in your outliner, you can find it organized. Okay. So if I look over here and I touch this and I come over and touch the group, it lights it all up right now. Okay. But you'll notice, actually it did what I wanted it to do. The pivot isn't there. I grouped it and the pivot's not there, and the reason why it's not there is it's coming over to the center of the world mass over here, okay, where I created everything. So if I hit C, then it centers the pivot. Okay, sometimes what happens when you go to select multiple objects like this and they're not grouped, okay, and you go to rotate, sometimes some of them will rotate, see like this guy right here, he's rotating in an opposite angle. Okay, to what all the other parts are rotating. And there's numerous reasons why that could happen. One is that you might have rotated that guy and you might be off axis a little bit. But another reason is that a lot of times there's history associated with one of the objects that you've already have. And you have multiple objects that you're trying to move or group that have a ton of history on them. When that happens, you're going to get this sort of weird effect where you're like, hey, I'm moving it. Why are they moving all in one direction? Or if it's not rotating, you're going to go to move it like this and see how that guy's moving away? I finally got it to work, okay? So see how that guy's moving in another direction? You're like, hey, what's going on? Why is it doing that? That's doing that because that particular object might have been slightly moved, rotated, or it has history on it, okay? So the thing to do is you need to come in, and actually I rotated that a little bit. So when I go to group all these and move them, it's going on its own pathway. Okay? So there are two main reasons. One, there might be an object with a slight tilt, and you just forgot about the degree that it happens to be set at. Number two is that there could be history attached with the particular object. So what we need to do is go in and delete the history. So to delete the history, I can select all the objects. I can go to Edit, Delete by Type, and I go over to History right there. So it's Edit, Delete by Type, History. And now that I've done that, it takes away all the history. So now if I go to move these objects, actually it didn't do it there too. That's because that's still rotated. Now what I could do on that, guys, I could freeze the transformations. If I go to Edit and, Modify, Freeze Transformations. Okay, and let's go see what happens there. Okay, it's still doing something different. So that part will not move correctly because it's already been rotated and there's a weird history to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to group all the items together, center the pivot with my hotkey, okay? And now if I go to move these objects, they're all going to sort of move together. Nothing's going to move out. Every now and then you'll have a group that's grouped together, and when you go to move something, one of the pieces takes off and dismantles. That's because there's a ton of history attached to it. And one of the best examples I like to give in Maya is that it's like a relationship. When you meet somebody, you're dating somebody, and then you find out that they were maybe arrested for like 3 DUIs, and then you find out 6 months later, like Paul was dating some girl, and he found out that she was a stalker, right? No, just kidding, Paul. And then all of a sudden you start finding out all this history, right? It's the same thing in Maya. There is history attached to your parts that you've made, or your models, or there might be nodes. There's something in there attached to it, and it's not going to work right until you clean the file, you ungroup it, you delete the history. So something that you need to do sometimes is this. Let me Command Z and go back here. Okay, you need to select parts inside your model, and you need to make sure that they're completely ungrouped. So you go all the way down here and just hit Control U, that's my hotkey, or just go under Edit, Ungroup, Ungroup, Because sometimes you might have had a piece, a model piece that had another piece attached to it, and you forgot that, and then you selected it with independent selection. Does that make sense? So let me show you. Let's pretend this guy had another piece together. I'm going to group both of them right now. But then I'm going to take this piece right here. I'm going to select all these, and I'm going to group these together. Okay? What happens is there's still some history attached between these two pieces because they were originally grouped together. But perhaps you forgot about that. And then you grouped it to this. So later on, if I'm working, modifying this group and changing it, this group still, that little piece right here, still has an attachment to that piece because they were originally grouped. Okay. In fact, if I come over and touch on that piece and look at it in the outliner, see, it's telling me it's in a grouping right there. And if I open up that grouping, it's telling me it's attached to, oh, it's attached to itself. But do you see how it's trying to find the other group there by moving the pivot? It's like, wait a minute, I had something here. So that's an example right there where that little object still has a weird history attached to it because it used to be grouped to another object. Artists that get into Maya do this all the time, where you're grouping something, you forget what was grouped before with something else, you didn't ungroup it all the way, and then when you go to rotate it and move it later, the pieces move, there's some type of weird history there. This is why. So when we go to what I call clean your model and group it all together, this is what you have to do, is you want to come over here. Now watch what happens if I ungroup this right now. If I hit Control U, okay, let's try that again. That's weird. It's not even letting me do it, but it's still going to keep the group. Let me delete by history. Saying ungroup everything. So what I did just now is I selected it all and ungrouped it. And look at that piece. Remember before that piece was on a grouping? Now it's not on a grouping, is it? It's just a poly surface plane right there by itself. So what happened when I selected all the pieces and ungrouped it, it got rid of any extra groupings that were old history attachments. Does that make sense? Okay, all right, that's number one. That can be a little confusing sometimes. I can help you, but if you're having a problem grouping your pieces together, or the pivot, when you group it, the pivot doesn't want to come to the center of the mass of the group, that's because you have history or another grouping still attached to it. Okay, all right. The other thing you want to do that you always want to make sure of, let me see how far I can go back here for a minute. And let's see if I can go back to when they return. Okay. Another thing you want to do is when you group your objects, you don't want to group your objects if they are turned like this, okay, in one grouping. I tend to want to group things that are exactly on 90s unless I'm purposely making a model or a piece or a part to be turned to have some type of character or characteristic in it. For example, like a bowl of chips on my Lazy Boy that looks like it's about to tip over, or maybe I have a Coke can that's rolled on its side on a napkin or something. That's different. But what happens is that when you rotate an object now like this and then you go to touch it, you see that? It's not connected anymore to its world. It's tilted at an angle. So if I went to move just this piece to adjust it, I can't right now because I'd already turned this at 52 degrees. Okay, so what I prefer to do is when I have a whole grouping like this, I make sure that everything is at a 90 in the particular direction I want, whether it be turned this way or that way. Then I group it together, everything straight. That way if I have to go in on independent selection, sorry, I'm using my hotkeys. I'm jumping between these selection points right here. So if I have to go in to independent selection and then move a piece and adjust it or something, okay, I can do that. Now, here's a really common practice that students do. I just did this real quick as a sample, but let's pretend that's an awesome engine piston or something. You model that piston, and then you see a part on that piston you want to use for another model that you're building on the side. Students will come over like this. There will be an independent selection, and they go, oh, that's my piston right there, the head of my piston. I can use that for part of my chair. They duplicate that, and they bring it over. Okay? Oops. Thought I hit duplicate. There it goes. All right, so now that I duplicated that, what happens when I go back to group selection? That's still part of that group. You see that? Does that make sense? So if I duplicate a part from a model that I've already made that's grouped together and I move it off to the side, that's still associated with that grouping. But then let's say I come over here and I start taking a piece and I model and I make another cool piece over here and I group those together, okay, there's still an attachment between those. Okay, so if I look at that piece and I come over here and look back in here, there was a grouping that was associated with that. And then again, that's part of the thing about selecting your pieces and grouping them. Okay, deleting the history by hitting Alt-H, group them all together, center the pivot, and now it's nice and grouped and it's centered. And then I could relabel that group. I could then come in here and I could call that piston. This is really important because as you go in and start to texture and assign shaders to parts of your model, you want to get things to look right. And this is the only way to get things to look right. Okay. All right. So in part of this demo, what I wanted to show you was this model that one of my students had did. This is part of our rocket share assignment, right? So that one of the problems is when I click on this, okay, this student did sort of a huge no-no. Is that when he grouped it together, he selected the whole thing and grouped it. He didn't group it in parts. So if I ungroup right now, look at the madness. Everything is in separate pieces. That's a huge mistake. Because if I were to pass this down to somebody in lighting or texturing, and they had to animate, or an animator, let's say they wanted to light some of this, it's going to take forever for me to go through. So that's what I have to do now. Is I have to go through and I have to group this and label it properly, and that's part of the demo that I wanted to do today to show you how to do that somewhat quickly. First thing I like to do is I go around and I touch pieces. Look at that pivot. Is that pivot in the center there? No. So if I hit, I need to go through now and center that. And then look, it's still slightly turned. That piece was originally turned. So that pivot's not centered. What about this piece here? That's not centered. That's not centered. So a lot of these pieces don't even have centered pivots, which means as I group them, all this weird history of where the pivot was placed is going to affect the overall model, and I might end up with a pivot way off to the left-hand side after I create a group. That's Maya telling me, there's tons of other history here and weird placements. You need to go in and clean the file, and this is how we clean our file. I go in and I select parts, and I ungroup them, and then I regroup them together. Like, look at that. He has that as, and what's really cool, to look at that in the outliner, I can select it, hold my cursor over the outliner, and hit F, and it takes me to the piece. Okay? The same way that you can go over here and touch something, like if I touch this and I hit F with my cursor over here, it takes me right to it. I can also do that going backwards. So if I touch that key, I want to know where that is. I hold my cursor over the outliner and hit F, and it takes me right to it. That's a nice little convenience for framing all in the view. So it even works on the outliner. Okay, so look at that controller. The pivot's way over here. I want to hit center just to get it centered right there. Okay, so what I would need to do now is I would start grouping this in pieces, and actually I could probably group this whole thing together in about 15 or 20 minutes, and this is how you would do it. Okay, take a selection, select part of it, and hit Control H. Boom. I just hid the rest of that model by hitting Control H. Okay, I don't need this right now. I'm going to select over this. Control H. Let's select these parts here. Control H. I'm going to come right over here. I'm going to look at that rocket engine. Okay. So right now I'm going to select this stuff here. Let me make sure it's okay. So I'm going to select that mount right there. Center pivot. I have a hotkey for this. Alt H is my delete by history. Alt H right now. Boom. I just deleted any history attached with that. Okay. I could come over here. I'm going to go to F, and I'm going to touch this right here. And I'm going to say support. Real quick, I'm going to label it. All right, now that that's done, okay, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to touch parts of the engine. Actually, let me hide that. I'll come back to that. So I'm going to take these right now. I'm going to group these two guys together. Group. And I might call these mounts. Hit F. Takes me right to the groups. And I call these mounts. Okay? Hit hide again. Now I'm going to come back here. Now here's two different approaches. That's my full rocket engine right there, right? So what I can do is I can just select the whole thing and group it, and then go inside the group and keep regrouping it. Does that make sense? That's one option. Or I could work from outside and select parts. Like look at that whole row of all those little detail parts right there. Do you see that? Those little nuts and bolts? If I want to group all those together, this is how I have to do it. Okay? But now I need to make a decision. I could select it like this, hold Control, deselect these other parts, and now I have those bands right there. However, this is made up of multiple pieces. Do you see that? And he actually combined all these into one. But let's say I'm just going to combine all those as one color. That's fine. I need to select all three, group them. I'm going to come over and call this band detail. Band detail. Because then when I go to, sorry, I can't type today. Then when I go to color this and put shaders on it, it's going to be that much more easier to find the areas because it's already grouped and prepped. And I really want to cover this because if you're going to do model for, I have lots of students that have taken out from this class and they go to start doing models and doing work and doing freelance for people. If you're going to do that, you have to make sure your model is cleaned and grouped and all ready to go. Nobody wants to get it with tons of history, ungrouped, and a solid mess, because then they're going to have to spend an hour cleaning it. Okay, if not longer. But you've made it so you know where all the parts are in the little increments. Okay, so look, now I have this big piece here. I'm going to come over here. Let's go to F. I'm going to label this rocket base. There, I got that labeled. I have a fin here. Just going to call it fin. And let's see what else I have. I have this area right there. So I select and deselect all the time by using control. It saves me a great, so look, I want to select, let's say I want to select these hoses right here. Go to see-through mode, select those hoses. Then I'm going to hit control, drag over, deselect. Then I'm going to hit control again. That's it. Boom, they're all selected that quick. Okay, hit group, center the pivot, come over here to the outliner, and I'm going to call these hoses. Okay. And so now I got, look at the detail I have. I have hoses, then I have this bracket nonsense over here. Not nonsense, it's actually good detail. Okay, so I'm going to deselect everything. Look, I have all the brackets selected right there. Do you see that? I'm going to group those together, center the pivot, delete the history, come over to the group. I'm going to label this, I don't know, bracket hoses, let's say. All right, so now I have that all grouped together. So let's go back to our model. Let's see what else I haven't grouped. That's grouped. Oh, I didn't get those little spheres in here. Let me select the row of the little spheres. Let me deselect the other areas here. Go to see-through mode. I'm going to deselect here. There, I have all kinds of almost like little details, and I got spheres in there too. So I got to decide there which ones I want. I'm going to deselect these by using control. There I have the spheres right there. I'm going to group those together. Let's come over here. I'm going to label those spheres S-P-H-E-R-E-S. There we go. And let's come back over here. And it gets easier the more that things are grouped, because now I can just deselect very quickly. And I can go back to just there. So now I can select that whole row there. Let's deselect what's here. So I have another type of detail right there. All right. I'm going to hit group, center the pivot, and let's call those other detail on there. Okay. Now, I'm going to come in. I'm just going to select the whole engine and group it together. Right? So watch. I'm going to drag over the whole entire engine, all the parts. Hit group. Boom. And I'm going to label this left rocket engine. Left rocket engine. Okay? Hold on. I can't type, guys. Sorry. Hit my left rocket engine. Rocker engine. Oops. There we go. Left rocket engine, right? Now center the pivot again. Boom. I hit center. If I hit center and that pivot doesn't go to the middle, what does that mean? I have a grouping problem or a history problem. If the pivot were to do this, if I hit center pivot and the pivot did that, that means there's an issue somewhere. I need to go back into my model and find out which grouping doesn't have a centered pivot. Does that make sense? And so to do that, I could come in like this. I could pull up my outliner again, and I could go under the rocket engine, and I could just touch the parts. And one of those parts, the pivot will snap off way to the side, and I could figure out which one it is. So look at these little areas right here. Okay, so check this out, guys. I was working in here and I grouped this together, and look at what I just discovered right here. That was a rocket. Oh, that was okay. So okay, that was a side part here. Okay, so there's a couple other parts there. So what I'm going to do is real quick, let me select this whole thing, center the pivot, and delete history, go into Alt-H. So I have a whole bunch of other little parts in detail here that aren't grouped yet. So I have more details there. Okay. Sometimes you'll discover you even have doubles of objects overlapping each other, which make your scene heavier. So that means I accidentally hit duplicate sometime, And when I touch those hoses right now, when I'm looking at it, it looks like there's one set of hoses, right? But if I touch them real quick, let me find the independent selection. See how it gives me that blur? I can tell there's doubles in there. So if I hit delete, oops, hold on, let me back up there. If I hit delete, there, now I'm back to the originals, okay? So it's easy to accidentally duplicate, and if you have too many doubles lying around, you're going to make your model larger too. That's something else to think about. So now I would go through here. Now what I like to do is I take all the other areas that I've grouped already. All this right here has been labeled, and I did the fin, right? And I hit H and I hide, and I see what's left. I did these strap guys here, but actually those didn't group for some reason. Okay, so I have the turbine. So I have other parts in here that I still need to come in and group really quick. That's some of this other detail right in here. But now I could work within the outliner, which is great. So watch. Let me come over here. I'm going to select all this right here. I'm going to deselect this. And I'm going to group these. They're already grouped. I'm going to call that the fan. Okay, that's done. So I'm going to select that guy right there. I'm going to group those together, send them to pivot, and I'm going to call that the rod, because then I'm going to group all these together. So then I have two fans here. So let me label this one fan, and I take both of them together, and the rocket engine. Excuse me. Oops, my bad. I'm selecting out. So watch, if I select this, I group that. That was called the rod, and then I had the fans. So if I hit independent and select that and find the fan right there, fan, rod, and where's the other fan that was back here? There it is, it's there. So I got fan right here. I could touch fan there, and then I could touch rod. Okay, so I did that by using my outliner and by pressing down on control. I selected those. Now I can group all those together, and I can call that turbine. So now when I come up on my outliner and I select it, see, it's all selected. Saves me a lot of work on grouping things together. Okay, so let's just keep going. I'm going to hide that guy now. Let's say I already have the fin. This was like a back. Let me group that together, and I'm going to call that back. I think it was like a light or something. Backlight. Okay, then I hide that. I've already hidden the fin. I need to group these guys together right here. Group. And call that. Wait a minute here. I thought I already had that selected. Yeah, I already had that grouped. Band detail. Okay. I have these areas here. So I'm going to select these as independent. They all register there. I'm going to group those together. I'm going to call those little box detail. Alright, there we go. And let's take a look at that. Let's see what this is grouped right here. That has the spheres. That's grouped. I'm going to hide those. And what about these? I have these two pieces here. So I'm going to group these. And then I'm going to call those rings. Okay. And then let's see here. I had the hoses over there. Okay. And now if I hit display show all, actually what I can do is also see how it says show selection. Okay, or I could say show all. So look, if I hit show all, it's going to show the whole entire thing, and then I got to hide them again. If I come up here to the outliner, and in the outliner I touch left rocket engine, and then I go back up under show, excuse me, right here, and go to show, display, show selection. Oh, it didn't do it. Usually it does it. It would show the whole entire selection that's there. But that's okay. What I can do is, since I already grouped it, is I can say, that's weird. Usually it does show it. Display, show, show all. And then look, I have the whole rocket engine right there grouped. And the great thing, if I group that one rocket engine, do I need to go and then regroup that whole rocket engine? No. It's a duplicate. If I wanted to, I could take this rocket engine, and then once I get the mounts that are connected with it, so if I group those together, and then I say mounts, okay, and then there's also mounts on this side too, right? So let me make sure those are smooth, and let me hit look for that. There it is. I'm going to call that mounts. So if I take that mounts, that engine, If I take that whole thing together there, see that? It's all one piece. I group that together now. And I'm going to call that left. Sometimes I abbreviate and then put an underscore. Left rocket, because I know what it is. And then what I can do is I can just duplicate that guy right now. And I can just bring him over right here. Now I need to inverse him. So I'm going to go this way. I'm going to flop him over like this. Put this at -1. Right? And I'm going to bring this back. And see, it fits right in there perfectly. So now I can, once I get him exactly in the place where he should be, I can hide him. And now I could come in here and I can delete that other rocket engine because I already grouped the other one together. I'm going to hide all this. And you see that now? I have the whole engine there. I can delete all that. Boom. Delete it. Delete it. Don't need it. And then display. Show all. And if I touch that guy and that guy, there they are. But I want to label him now right because it's a copy. So I'm just going to come in here, go back and type in R rocket. And then I'm going to touch both of them, group those together, and I'm going to call these rockets. Or I could call them engines if I want. So that took me about 10 minutes, right? Because there's a lot of detail on there. But now look at how easy, if I'm working, when I click that open, I have left and right. I could go to the right engine, click open the right engine right now, and I have all these lists of little details on here. There's still a couple little, oh, those are other parts. I have the mounts, I have the engine itself, so I can click on the engine itself. I can go in here, I have the back bands, all this good stuff. That's going to help me when I go to assign little details or shaders to it. Okay? It's all going to be there for me to get lots of information about. Okay? So this model is much more complex. There's a lot of detail in here. It would probably take me about 40 minutes or so to go in here and clean this. And one of the problems is the artist that made this didn't do all that in the beginning. Okay? If you do this while you're working, you save yourself all this time and energy. So I'm letting you know now, because you guys are all newbies, right? But as you're working, think about grouping your stuff together and labeling it as you're working. That way you don't have to do it all at the end and spend 40 minutes on it to have it all prepped and ready to go. Okay? All right, so when I'm all done with that, I'm going to select both these, and then I'm going to go to Alt History. So I hit my hotkey of Alt H, which is up in the main menu. It's Edit, Delete All by Type, and History right there. Okay? And that deletes any history associated with these guys. Now I have my rocket engines done. Okay? All right. Let me save right here, and then I'm going to bring up, I want to export these engines real quick. I'm going to bring one of these engines in, and I'm going to start to render it in that other software that I was telling you guys about. Okay? And I'm going to show you how to use that. So let me stop right here and save. And that is grouping and cleaning up our history and getting our item all grouped together. The other thing too, which I didn't get a chance to do, but when I get a file from a student that's having a problem, there's a save ratio size where I can take a file from somebody that might be a 60 megabyte file, and if I go in there and clean it, delete the history, group it together, and resave it, it's now 40 megabytes. I can lose 20 megabytes of history and weird groupings that are all associated with a file. So that's really important too, because you don't want to pass your work down a Maya production pipeline to other artists in a game studio or an animation studio, having all that extra megabytes in history and grouping and extra nodes and items associated with the model that haven't been cleaned and taken care of. Okay, so that's huge. All right, let me stop this and save this, and then we'll come back and talk about the rendering systems.